Hello, welcome to the fifth episode of Real Turkey, a weekly YouTube program that covers Turkish politics, economy, financial markets, and anything else that may be of interest to an international audience. I am your regular host, Atilla Yesilada, and our regular guest is Ms. Guldem Atabay, who is also a renowned economist, academician, as well as a political commentator, writing articles for several publications. Good morning, Guldem.
Good morning, Attila.
Well, yeah, it is. There is no summer vacation in Turkey. Events become more excited as days pass. Yesterday's headline, of course, was the delivery of the first batch of parts for the S-400 anti-missile system. Turkish TVs provided live coverage all day, and Turkish markets spooked all day. Now, we also expected a press conference by the American Department of Defense or Pentagon, which was canceled in the last second. On the other hand, leading US senators had threatened sanctions and have implored President Trump to impose these sanctions at once. Where do we stand vis-a-vis sanctions?
Well, as you use the word threat, I don't think it's a threat anymore, Attila, because there have been many times, occasionally, warnings about the consequences of buying this S-400 missile systems from Russia and deploying them in the Turkish soil. How it will be contradicting with the NATO alliance and Turkey's relationship with the US government. So we'll just start seeing the consequences. Their delivery has just begun, and the government is just talking about they'll be located in Syrian border as well as in Ankara. So this is just not a show off from the government ranks to addressing to the Turkish public, but this is a real, like a declaration to the U.S. government that we as Turkish government proceeding with this missile systems launching on Turkish soil. So I think the cancellation of that press conference, it will just see the press conference later in today, perhaps, or maybe tomorrow. So they'll be contacting with our defense minister, Mr. Akar. And I think the CAATSA sanctions will become gradually will be becoming real for Turkey in the weeks and months ahead. So there's no question about this.
I think it's important to, broaden this question because in Turkey, there is a widespread perception that Trump, because of his friendship with our President Erdogan, can bail
Yeah.
Turkey out. Is that possible? Can Trump waive or completely postpone CAATSA sanctions?
Well, I think that's kind of wishful thinking from the Turkey side, and we've seen what they talked in the Osaka meetings back last week in the G20 summit in Japan. It was not as friendly as the Turkish press showed to the Turkish citizens. But what we see is that the U.S. Congress and Pentagon is very keen on these sanctions and cutting Turkey from the F-35 deal and from many other things as well. So I don't think that's even possible. Maybe Trump will be delaying, depending on the negotiations around Syria or Middle East, this Congress decision that we should be expecting about these sanctions further down into the year. But I don't think inevitably they'll become real for Turkey, given the situation.
Well, it's not the only sanctions front that Turkey will be battling. EU is also up in arms in the face of quote unquote Turkish aggression in the Eastern Mediterranean. To just explain the subject briefly to our audience, Cyprus is a disputed island. EU believes it belongs completely to our Greek Cypriot friends. We, of course, think there is mutual sovereignty between Greek and Turkish Cypriots. Thus, we and the Turkish Cypriots can drill in the exclusive economic zone of Cyprus. And Turkey has indeed sent out two drilling ships, which are currently active, I believe. And Greece and the Greek Cypriots have become extremely angry about that. And EU has I think the EU foreign ministers have proposed sanctions, which will now go to the next EU leaders summit. Am I correct in that? And what kind of sanctions can they impose? We're hardly doing business with those people.
Well, we have the agreement. The most, I think, important one from the European Union side is the refugee agreement. So I don't think there'll be any harsh sanctions from the European Union ranks. But one of the threats or one of the sanctions, the possibility of sanctions, is cutting the aids for Turkey, which are directed to the real sector and especially to the agricultural sector in Turkey for the reform process. That will mean something for Turkey if those cuts are aids are cut. And European Union, European Investment Bank lending could be reduced as well. And this will again mean something for Turkey because it will be adding to a couple of perhaps $1 billion down the road if we are to insist on this drilling conflict in the East Mediterranean, let's say. But I think the refugee deal, the European threats, the Turkey is threatening the European side occasionally, many times in the past, through the mouths of government ranks, especially our President Erdogan. I think that will be a serious thing that will be capping their or controlling their steps further to impose further or stronger sanctions. But when it comes to any real progress on the European Union accession, that's already dead. So there's not much to do there on that front, I guess.
I think there are also economic implications. The renewal of the customs union agreement, as well as its extension to services, is of prime importance, but that probably won't sail anymore as long as the Cyprus conflict is on the agenda. Am I correct?
I think you are, yes, but that's not an imminent. That was not an imminent expectation. We were into kind of
With or without Cyprus, it wasn't going to happen. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. So with or without Cyprus, it was going to take some time, given Turkey's social political mess, let's say, or instability. Human rights and everything. So that was already going to take time. So I don't think that's going to be on the table just because of Cyprus drilling. There are more serious things than that in Turkey. That's like blocking relations, Turkey's relations with the European Union bloc.
Let's move on to domestic politics because there the witch's brew is boiling too. When I read the Western press, there seems to be two ideas which stand exactly at opposition to each other. One, regardless of local elections, Erdogan remains the undisputed leader, perhaps the only important political actor on the scene. And others, which are in the minority, claim the Istanbul elections was the end of the beginning. To support the second thesis, without, of course, subscribing to either of them, being an independent journalist that I am, Ali Babacan, former economy czar, has resigned from AKP, and the news is that he is in the process of establishing a new party. First of all, do you think Babacan will be able to steal deputies from AKP? Two, more broadly, does he stand any chance against Erdogan and his, what's described as incredible charisma?
Well, as you said, I'm more close to the second rank, who says that it's not the beginning of end of AKP, but there's some serious action or serious cacophony going on in the AKP as a party, just because of the results of the local elections, especially the Istanbul rerun, where the AKP was defeated decisively by the voters living in Istanbul. And I think for a first time, one of the founder members of the AKP is resigning from the party to form another party, maybe by the end of the summer, or as was announced yesterday, by the end of the year, or perhaps by the start of next year. It doesn't really matter. But what we're saying is, for the first time, our president is going to take a round tour of the AKP local administrations and its organizations throughout the cities around Turkey. So I think these are all signs that there is some kind of uneasiness from Erdogan's side, that this movement, this political party formation, might be attracting some of the power from the AKP. Like we're seeing names being published in daily newspapers, like 20, 40 people are ready to join Babacan's ranks. But these are to be seen, of course. There's always some twists that Erdogan can deliver in Turkish politics. But what we're sure is that there is going to be opposition, and that opposition, as for the first polls, are able to raise some 12 to 20% of votes from AKP, as the first polls are showing, which might be too early because they don't have a program yet. But I think this is serious. This is really going to be weakening AKP in a couple of years ahead, I think.
Yeah, my recollection is that whenever this new party emerges, there's an announcement effect, and the first polls always show exaggerated popularity. You're right. We will have to see. But let's tie that in to the sudden flurry of legislation passed by the assembly, submitted by AKP, the 11th development plan, what we call the omnibus economy bill, as well as several other suggestions, such as the judicial reform bill, which will probably come to the floor in the autumn session of the Grand Assembly. Are any of these in response to the Ali Babacan threat? Was that always AKP's game plan? Do you see a new roadmap emerging, or are these just ad hoc, seat of the pants acts to improve the economy?
Well, what they were saying for the period after the election was that they were going to be focusing back on the economy. And what we're seeing is that 11th development plan, if you really believe that it can be delivered by this government, is not a product of like a couple of weeks ago. It needs to be prepared perhaps for a longer period in the past. So this is not as a reaction to the local polls results. Rather, what we're seeing is they are giving priority to growth again through this restructuring efforts within the bill that you've talked about. They have put some items that will be directing for or focusing on the troubled real sector companies in Turkey. These are like reactions to the elections results and Babacan threats, perhaps, because what we know is he was our former economy minister, who was in charge during the most successful years of the AKP. Ali Babacan has very strong relations with the Western world, including financial community. And when he talks about economy, if he comes up with a credible economy plan, the Western financial world will listen, will give credit to Ali Babacan, which is, after all these years, is not given to the current economy management in Turkey. So this is a real threat, and they are doing some ad hoc steps as well, which are again like facelifting for the short term.
Botox injections.
Yes, and we're already talking about early elections since right after the
That's good.
local
Yeah,
elections.
That's I forgot to mention that. I don't know if the West understands that, but there's a lot of talk, rumors about early elections. How do you assess those? Are they realistic?
I think they are very realistic because we're giving the steps that not the government, our President Erdogan has been taking since after the election, especially starting with the central bank decision that he's taking control of on
That's
that
the
front.
removal of the central bank governor for
Yes.
apparently not legal reasons.
Not
Reasons
legal reasons.
construed as legal. Yeah, go ahead.
So these are all steps that showing that how fast he wants the interest rates to be pulled down, how urgently he needs economy to get back on a growth trend. He's trying to find resources on that front. So these are all signs that they're in urgency on the economy front. So supposedly they should have 4.5 years that they don't have any elections down the road, which the priorities, economic priorities, starting with lowering the very high inflation rate, could have taken the priority. Instead, we're seeing growth taking priority again from the government trend. So these are all signs that the possibility of early elections are very high, combined with competition from within the AKP ranks, a serious competition starting with Abdullah Gül and Ali Babacan movement. So I think they're trying to get ready for the possibility of early elections in Turkey.
Okay, dear viewers, this concludes the 5th episode of Real Turkey. We have listened to Ms. Guldem Atabay, an economist and political commentator widely known in Turkey. A few words from the production crew. We understand that the production crew quality is extremely poor, and the internet connections are not best. We are trying to improve the situation as quickly as possible. We promise much better reception, much higher definition, and whatever the technical words are. Please give us about a month to sort things out and to shoot a couple of people at Türk Telekom, the monopoly provider of internet, to present you with the quality of programming that you deserve. Thank you very much, and keep watching us.
Bye-bye.